Mark chapter number 12, and we'll begin reading in verse number 38. This morning during our prayer meeting, me and Brother Andy, Brother Levi, and Brother Lunsford were talking about, kind of joking about folks that do Christmas a little early. And I talked about we shouldn't do, you don't celebrate Christmas until December. We decided to decorate a little bit early, but I guess it's allowed. I told Jessica years ago, right after we got married, which just because I say it doesn't mean much, but one holiday at a time. We can't do decorations on Christmas until after Thanksgiving. That's the rule. But yeah, so you can do what you want to do. How many of you have already you've had a Christmas tree up for at least a couple of weeks? Right. That's so sad. But no, I'm just kidding. No, that's fine. I don't think there's a verse in the Bible that says you're not allowed to do that. I'm pretty certain there's not one there. I just, you go to Walmart 3 weeks before Halloween, and they've already got their Santa Claus stuff up. But I understand. It's fine. I'm not bothered. But no, I think that the church looks great. Praise the Lord for it. We're already festive. And honestly, if we got to next Sunday and we haven't decorated yet, then we're behind. So better ahead than behind. But no, we had several ladies here, LV and Trita and a few others helping out, making the church look pretty. So if you go home today and there's glitter all over your rear end, that's because you sat up front, and that's where the other wreaths were. So sorry about that, but the Christmas, blew up all over the auditorium yesterday, and we did our best to clean it up. But anyways, next week, in the next few weeks, we'll start talking more about Christmas. And every December, I usually preach a series on Sunday mornings that is somewhat connected to Christmas. I think there's a verse in the Bible that says you have to do that too, like waiting until December to decorate. But I don't know, that's just what we normally do. But today, at least, I wanted to finish this chapter in Mark chapter number 12, and I thought this message would be helpful to us. In Mark 12, in verse number 38, the Bible says, "And he said unto them in his doctrine, Beware of the scribes, which love to go in long clothing, and love salutations in the marketplaces, and the chief seats in the synagogues, and the uppermost rooms at feasts, which devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayers. These shall receive greater damnation. And Jesus sat over against the treasury, and beheld how the people cast money into the treasury, and many that were rich cast in much. And there came a certain poor widow, and she threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing. And he called unto him his disciples, and saith unto them, Verily I say unto you, that this poor woman hath cast more in than all they which have cast into the treasury. For all they did cast in their abundance, but she of her want did cast in all that she had, even all her living." This passage this morning is in 2 different halves, seeing what Jesus thinks of this group of people, then seeing how Jesus thinks of this lady. And when I was reading this passage, I was praying about how to deal with it. And the Lord impressed on my heart this thought: what impresses Jesus? I think this woman, she impressed the Lord Jesus. We'll talk about both of these groups this morning. But first, let's pray. God, I ask for your help. Speak to my heart, I pray, this morning, even as I preach. Feed me as I preach. And I thank you for teaching me the truths from this passage, and that I think would be helpful to us all. Speak to us, I pray, this morning, and may we be more concerned about you than anybody else. May we be more concerned about what you see than what others see. Challenge us to be stronger Christians, more in love with you, more spiritually minded. And God, we don't deserve glory from anybody. But Lord, when you look at us, may we be living a life that honors you, so that you would be willing to say, come look at this person and what they've done, as you did with this lady here, that we read about 2,000 years later. Speak to us, I ask, in Jesus' name. Amen. The Bible tells us it's not just a history book. It's not just a book of poetry or just good moral lessons. It's a book about God. It's a book about the Lord Jesus Christ. Even from Genesis to Revelation, it's all really about Jesus Christ and His salvation. But the Bible tells us about our God, and it tells us about His unlimited power. The Bible tells us about God's infinite resources. The Bible tells us about God's complete understanding of everything. The Bible tells us about God's perfect wisdom in every situation. But there's nothing our God really needs from us to exist. God existed way before man. He's always existed. And there's nothing that our God cannot do. Come back tonight. We'll actually talk about something that God cannot do. And but we get the point of God's power with that statement. There's nothing beyond God's power. But anyways, when God looks at a person and shows that he or she is doing something that impresses him, we should take notice of that. It doesn't say that phrase, Jesus was impressed by this woman. But when we look at the passage, we see how Jesus responded to what she did and her faith and her love for the Lord. And obviously, Jesus was impressed by her actions and attitude. But in the passage, we've talked about the last several weeks, Jesus finally escapes for a moment the arguments and the questions and the accusations from the scribes and the Pharisees and the Herodians. Each week we haven't nailed that main thought, but each week we've seen a different group kind of trying to pin Jesus down and failing to do so. But the Bible says in Proverbs a statement about God. It says about man and God. It says, every way of a man is right in his own eyes, but the Lord pondereth the hearts. We'll leave off the first part of that for this morning about man doing what's right in his own eyes, but the last phrase says the Lord pondereth the hearts. God does not only look at you and your actions and what you're doing, but God sees your heart, God sees your thoughts. And not only is God aware of them, but God pondereth them. He thinks about them. He thinks about what you're thinking about. It's not just something that crosses by his attention, but it's something that he's seriously paying attention to. So the Lord pondereth the hearts. God sees your heart, your thoughts, and he sees what's on the inside that no one else can see. But people, they live their life, they think about how, if they're okay or not, then how people think them to be. But God knows what's really in your life and what you're dealing with. God knows not only your actions, but every thought, feeling, desire, intention, and motivation you have. So, when God looks at you and when God looks at others, he knows everything about them. That's encouraging and scary. But God sees the in and the out. Here, Jesus looks at people. He looks first at the scribes, deals with them and warns about the scribes, but then he looks at this woman, and he sees not only what they're doing, but he sees, especially with the scribes, he sees their past, but he sees their attitude, he sees their intentions, he sees why they're doing what they're doing. And I want to look at that this morning, the heart of these people and what impresses Jesus. We have 2 points this morning. Number one, the things that do not impress Jesus, and number two, the things that do impress Jesus. So simple thoughts, the things that do not and the things that do impress Jesus. So first, let's look at the first half of this passage, verses 38 to 40. So follow along with me. In verse number 38, it says, and he said unto them, so Jesus is speaking to these people, said unto them in his doctrine, beware of the scribes. Time out for just a second. If Jesus says beware of something, he's warning, don't be like them. Well, he's a couple different things. He says don't be like them, but also don't be influenced by them, right? So we kind of get the point. So this is a warning for us to not be like these people. Beware of the scribes, which love to go in long clothing and love salutations in the marketplaces, and the chief seats in the synagogues and the uppermost rooms at feasts, which devour widows' houses and for a pretense make long prayers. These shall receive greater damnation. This is a totally negative passage and negative thought of these kinds of supposedly spiritual people that aren't very spiritual at all. They're religious but not spiritual. But Jesus sees them and pays attention to them and says, don't be like them. But he says, beware of them. Avoid these kinds of people and certainly do not become like them. And he looks at the scribes and warns of things that are not right. And he gives several things, and I've broken them down into 3 different categories. Number one, he says, beware of them, and he says these are some things that do not impress Jesus. Number one, long robes, and I'll have to explain, long robes do not impress Jesus. Long robes do not impress Jesus. You can think of that in a very practical way, whatever bathrobe you have or whatever, it may not totally impress Jesus, but that's not really the point of it. But what is the point of the long clothing here? And again, the long clothing, this is again not talking about your bathrobe, neither is it talking about modest apparel. The Bible does deal with that, about how men and women biblically should dress in a way that is modest, covering their nakedness and covering their figures and things like that to not draw undue sexual attention to yourself, or even making people think you're rich. That is a biblical concept, but that has nothing to do what this passage is talking about. But he says, don't be like them, which love to go in long clothing. The clothing that these people would wear would be these long robes, or these clothes to show a place of respect. The long robes that do not impress Jesus, it's all about bringing honor to yourself. And that's the point of it. It's not about modesty. It's about men who wear long, extravagant robes with stoles hanging down. And the most obvious thing that I would think about would be, and again, they're not wrong for wearing this, like a judge. They would wear the long robe. And if you're in a courtroom and the guy walks in front of you wearing a long robe, you stand up and you show him some respect, right? Because it's not just that he's wearing a long black robe. You know he's the judge, you know he's in charge, and you know that you can get kicked out or arrested if you do the wrong thing, right? So you show the judge some respect. Well, that's kind of what they were. Based on their clothing, they demanded respect, and they loved it. Not only did they do it, but they loved it. They wanted people to look up to them. They wanted respect that they really didn't deserve. The robe showed importance. The religious leadership would wear that certain garb, and not just a long black robe, but something highly decorative to show that they are a place of importance. And again, while there's nothing wrong with looking your best, Jesus does not look down on people and think, wow, look how fancy they are. God is not impressed with how nice your suit is. None of you are really wearing that kind of robe, but God doesn't look at us and say you have a nice suit or a fancy tie or a nice purse and become impressed with you. There's nothing wrong with looking nice, but don't think that's going to impress God by how expensive your clothing is. Jesus is not impressed by you trying to bring yourself honor. I brought a sermon illustration. Hopefully I don't tear up anything. But this is kind of the thought of this morning. This is what they were trying to do. The whole point of these scribes was their whole life was all about climbing a ladder. The camera might not catch this, but we'll see what we can do. The whole point of the scribes, beginning with their clothes and doing more, was they wanted to climb the ladder and look better than everybody else, be higher than everybody else. And their clothes said that. Their clothes said, I'm something above you. That's what they're trying to be. So you know the phrase, climbing the corporate ladder. And again, there's nothing wrong with getting a promotion. But when you live your life to be above others, then there's a problem. When you live your life thinking the higher I get up, the more impressive I am to others and to God, then your heart's not right. And that's what part of the scribes' problem was. Again, I don't know what their promotion would be, but their attitude was, I'm up here and you're down there. So long robes, the clothes of honor, they don't really respect God, or they don't impress God. There's a second thing in verse number 38. Beware of the scribes, which love to go in long clothing, and love salutations. Love salutations in the marketplaces, in the chief seats in the synagogues, and the uppermost rooms at feasts. Secondly, so Jesus warns about those that love their long robes. Long robes don't impress Jesus. It's not about your clothes. It's not about your appearance that makes people, that people may be impressed by that. People may be captivated by how much money you spend on your clothes, but God doesn't really care about that at all. But secondly, not only do long robes not impress Jesus, but looking important. This will be a separate thing, but looking important does not impress Jesus. What was the salutations in the marketplaces? I immediately thought of them wanting to stand in front of people and give speeches, but that's not really what that's talking about either. The salutations is what people would say to them and what other people would think of them and the titles that other people would give to them. And that's what it's talking about. They loved to be recognized as something, as sir or as the honorable or as some title. That's what they wanted to be known as. And again, most people, a lot of people, depending on your job, you may have a title in front of your name. People call me Pastor Carey, but I can demand to be called this or this or this. You call me Reverend, or I'm not a doctor, but if I was, you can make you call me doctor and things like that because I demand respect. God's not impressed by that at all. But that's what they would do. They want to be called master or sir or honorable or something along those lines because they want to be recognized. Keep your finger here and go to Matthew 23. There's no Mark 23. Matthew 23. And Jesus deals with this here in Matthew 23. And we'll read several verses that express that kind of mindset. Matthew 23, verse 1. Then spake Jesus to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do. But do not ye after their works, for they say and do not. Matthew 23:4, for they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. But all their works they do for to be seen of men. And there's the heart of it. They make broad their phylacteries and enlarge the borders of their garments, and love the uppermost rooms at feasts, and the chief seats in the synagogues, and greetings in the markets, and to be called of men, Rabbi, Rabbi. But be not ye called Rabbi, for one is your master, even Christ, and all ye are brethren. And call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your Father which is in heaven. Neither be ye called masters, for one is your master, even Christ. But he that is greatest among you shall be your servant. So Jesus gives this warning here. Again, sometimes people have titles, and sometimes people call you things, and it's not really your fault. But the problem was they wanted to be elevated above people in their title. I'm better than you because I have this degree. I'm better than you because I have this job. I'm better than you, and you better recognize me as that. That's kind of what they were. They wanted to be impressive to others, and God didn't think much of them. In fact, Jesus condemned them for it. They did it because of their position. They did it because of their pride to be seen of men. And Jesus says, don't live that way. Especially don't allow someone to give you a title that only belongs to God. Back in Mark 12, verse 39, it says, in the chief seats in the synagogues. I've been to dinners where, usually at churches and things like that, where, there's the normal people, and then there's the bigwigs, and it's nothing, they're not doing anything wrong, but the important people all sit together and stuff like that. You ever been to a dinner like that? Right. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, especially when all the bigwigs are friends, But, the issue was that sometimes there's a place where there's the separation of people based on importance and things like that. And the scribes, they wanted to be at the chief seat. They wanted to be in the best room and the best table. They wanted to be, and not just with their friends, but they wanted to be seen as important. They wanted to be the important people. And also, they did not, part of that, of wanting to be with them, is they didn't want to be with the less important people. The craving for that is all from a heart of pride. When the pursuit of your life is to climb the ladder, again, sometimes you just need a bigger paycheck because you can't pay the bills. I get that. Sometimes you get a promotion just because you deserve it and because you work hard. That's great. But when your life is captivated by getting higher, in being better than others, that's a pride issue. And God's not impressed. The scribes, it wasn't just about that, but it became something even more serious in verse number 40, which devour widows' houses. That's not very good. Robbing from widows and things like that, taking away from them. But notice this next phrase, and for a pretense, make long prayers. Remember that word pretense. That's a big issue. For a pretense, make long prayers. These shall receive greater damnation. Talk about long robes, bringing honor to self, does not impress Jesus. Looking important, that's an elevation of your name, does not impress Jesus. And then thirdly, lying prayers do not impress Jesus. That's a false spirituality. For a pretense, they made long prayers. I've heard some of those eloquent, spiritually sounding, poetic prayers imaginable. I remember going to a church service. I was in England at the time, and a guest preacher came to preach at a church that I was at. And you know how, normally have an opening prayer, whatever the order of service is, a song and a prayer, whatever the rule is. There's no rule. But I remember going to a church, and we sang a song, and then the guest preacher, opened in prayer. And it was seriously like 15 minutes long of like Shakespearean, perfect, beautiful English with 17-syllable words and that kind of stuff. And the guy had it wasn't just him talking and being seriously in prayer for a long time, but it was definitely put on. Maybe I'm being judgmental, but it sure seemed that way, at least for the part that I was awake for. And then not only with the great big language, but it was like with an operatic type voice and the hand motions and stuff like that. I think that was exactly what this verse is talking about. For a pretense, making long prayers. Maybe if I prayed a long time with big eloquent words and fancy speech, maybe the people will think I'm more spiritual than I really am. And that's what they did. God's not impressed. God's not impressed by fake prayers. God's not impressed by you. There's nothing wrong with praying in public and leading in prayer. It's a biblical concept. But there is something wrong with leading in prayer for the sake of you not really talking to God, but making people think well of you. They were aiming for glory. The scribes were aiming for glory for themselves. And for a pretense, they were pretending to be something. They were pretending to be spiritual, and they weren't. Ian Bounds, dealing in his book called The Pastor in Prayer, wrote, "The short prevailing prayer cannot be prayed by one." Oh, let me explain this and then I'll read. Long prayer, let me say it this way. Praying long is good, depending on where you are. You cannot be a prayer warrior without spending a good amount of time in prayer. But the time for long praying is not in public in front of people for show. The time for long praying is in private in your prayer closet. You cannot have a genuine prayer life if you have a short prayer life at home and private. I'm not sure if I'm saying this right. You cannot have a genuine prayer life, a strong prayer life, if you pray short in private and long in public. That's fake. Ian Bounds, in the book Pastor in Prayer, wrote, "The short prevailing prayer cannot be prayed by one who has not prevailed with God in a mightier struggle of long continuance." He said what I just said, but prettier. Jacob's victory of faith could not have gained without an all-night wrestling. In other words, you should have long times of prayer. There should be time, the song Sweet Hour of Prayer. Anyone know that song? Sweet Hour of Prayer. Have you ever met what that song was talking about? Have you ever prayed for an hour? That's a good question. It's hard to sing that song when you have no idea what that is about. Have you ever, gotten so serious about something you just spend long amounts of time? This is not really in the notes, but you know you needed the Lord. You know you need to be right with God. You knew that you just had to have this thing from God. Or maybe it wasn't just a thing. Maybe it was direction. Maybe it was wisdom. Maybe it was counsel. God, I have no idea what to do, but I'm going to stay on my knees and stay on my face in prayer until I get an answer from you. That's what God wants from us. There should be times of long, serious, heartfelt prayer. No one needs to necessarily know about it, but God. Sometimes, Jesus spent all night in prayer, and it wasn't for show. There should be times where we get serious about prayer. But the issue is this, it's not long prayers that's the problem. The problem is when there's no genuine prayer life, and then for a pretense you make long prayers, trying to make people impressed by your fake spirituality. They're pretending to pray, pretending to be spiritual, pretending to know God. That's the pretense. The word pretense means an outward showing or a cloak. In other words, they were putting something on top of them to cover them up. So again, they would make long prayers to, look how spiritual I am and you lowly peasants down there. God certainly is not impressed by a fake spirituality. And it doesn't have to be your prayer. It could be just how you talk. And we're all guilty of this from time to time. Maybe you had a fight on the way to church, you've been yelling at your kids, you're yelling at your wife or whatever, and then you show up and you put on the Christian voice when you get into the church building. We all struggle with that a little bit from time to time, but that ought not be normal. And there's really no place for a fake spirituality. God's not impressed by our fake spirituality. Now, there's a difference between fake spirituality and you sinning and getting right with God. That should be the normal thing. You sin, you get right with. When you sin, you get right with God. But God's not impressed by, look how spiritual I am, because of how I look and how I talk and who I claim to be friends with, and not so much in this room, but I know sometimes there's places, well, I went to that church, or I know that preacher, God's not impressed. So God's not impressed when we elevate self. So let's talk about the thing that does impress Jesus. The thing that does impress Jesus. I feel like I've got dust all over me because I didn't clean that thing. Verse 41. And Jesus sat over against the treasury, beheld how the people cast money into the treasury, and many that were rich cast in much. And there came a certain poor widow, and she threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing. And he called unto him his disciples, and saith unto them, Verily I say unto you, that this poor widow woman hath cast more in than all they which have cast into the treasury. For all they did cast in of their abundance, but she of her want did cast in all that she had, even all her living. Jesus was impressed by this woman. He condemns and saying these will have greater damnation because they think they're spiritual, but they're not. Because they're pretending to be spiritual, they're not. They're going to face greater judgment. But Jesus says, disciples, come over here for a second. Come over. I want you to see this lady. And not only did Jesus call his disciples over to him and say, I want you to watch this lady or see who this lady is, and I want you to see her godliness, see her spirituality. But God had it pinned down for us. So for 2,000 years, been able to read. Well, we're not that old. But for 2,000 years, Christians have been able to read about this lady and her godliness and what impressed the Lord. I don't think she knew. She probably never knew this was here. But God knew what was going on in her life. So as Jesus watched the scribes, he in his omniscience, being all-knowing, and his holiness, saw men who appeared to be spiritual, but were spiritually bankrupt. But then he looks again and sees a woman who is literally bankrupt, but has a great love for the Lord. But Jesus sees this woman that impresses him. And it was not about her position. She had no position. She was just a widow woman. She didn't have anything. Apparently, she did not have anyone to take care of her. It wasn't about her power, because, again, she had none. It was not about her riches, because after she gave, then she had absolutely nothing. What honored the Lord, what impressed the Lord, was her giving heart. Verse 44 explains why. For all they did cast in of their abundance, but she of her want did cast in all that she had, even of all her living. I've heard, by the way, time out for a second. I've heard people say, because I have so much, I'm not going to give. You've missed the point of this. Jesus commands everyone to give. Every believer, if you have an income, you ought to honor the Lord with the first fruits of all your increase. It's a biblical thing to tithe, to give 10% of your income to the Lord. It's also a biblical thing to give to other needs beyond that, whether it's charitable or helping people eat and things like that, or giving to the needs of the church and missions and other stuff. It's biblical to give, right? Right. So if you have a lot, you're not sinning by giving a lot. However, Jesus was not condemning their giving, but Jesus was honoring her giving, because not only it's not that she gave of her abundance, but she gave of her want. She gave when she had really nothing to give. So Jesus was impressed by the kind of giving that she had, was not condemning the other people for giving a lot. So don't make that excuse. But the Bible says she had, or verse 42, and there came a certain poor widow woman, she threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing. You can Google this if you want to, because anyone have a mite on you? I don't have that kind of change, right? So none of us, we don't carry that or a farthing today. In England, not too terribly long ago, they still used farthings. Their change was really weird numbers. It was not like 5s and 10s and weird, odd number, clear numbers like that, but it was weird stuff. So there is something similar to that. Some would say that a farthing was a half or a quarter of a penny. That's not very much. Today, if you had a penny, that can't buy you very much. In the Bible days, a penny was a day's worth of work, right? So 1 penny is what you got after working a day. A penny would go a lot further. But still, that's not that very much. It would be a part of a day's work. I also read somewhere that a mite, because of the math, would equal 6 minutes of work. That's not a whole lot of money either. I also read somewhere else that based on the price of grapes per pound, that this lady had enough money to buy 3 grapes. I don't know who's right, but the whole point is she didn't have much money. She was pretty much flat broke. If you've got enough money to buy only a thing of grapes, then you're not going very far through the day. But regardless of what it was not very much. She could buy very little. Verse 44, again, she of her want did cast in all she had. What impressed the Lord? She gave everything that she had, even though it was small, she gave everything that she had to the Lord. And that impresses God. And it's not just about money. It can be anything in your life. God fully expects us, by the way, to give Him everything that we have, to give full control of everything that we have to God. And God is impressed when we and I have a spirit, when we have an attitude that says, you know what, I really don't have that much, but God, whatever I do have, you can have. That's what God fully expects us. And this poor widow woman, she wasn't all about the ladder. She knew she was way down at the bottom. She didn't have nothing. But it didn't matter. Everything that she had, she gave to the Lord. And God was impressed. Why? Let me give you a little bit more detail to it. When she gave everything that she had, and when we give everything we have, then by definition, we're giving sacrificially. When we give all we have, we are giving sacrificially. It hurt. They gave of their abundance, but she gave to where it hurt. You ever give something, whether it could be money, it could be just time or whatever, you give to where it hurts you a little bit, it's going to cost you something? That ought to be kind of a normal thing. But Jesus was impressed because she gave to where it hurt her. Well, how did it hurt her, Pastor? What was she going to eat the rest of the day? I don't know where she worked, but I don't know how often they gave her a paycheck. She didn't have anything. She gave of her want. She was now in want. She was desperate now. She had nothing. She didn't get to buy those 3 grapes. She gave all she had, and it cost her something. It could have been her light bill. It could have been, her Wi-Fi. It could have been her dinner, whatever it was. She made life less convenient for herself in order to honor the Lord. She made her life less convenient in order to honor the Lord. When we give all, we give sacrificially. When we give all we have, we not only give sacrificially, but we give faithfully. In other words, in faith. Okay, God, everything I had, I gave it to you. Now what? I don't think she was giving everything she had because she was done with life. I think she just wanted to honor the Lord. And when she did that, she's saying, okay, God, it's up to you now. You ever give that way? You give to where you know that God has to take care of you. In fact, the Bible does say, whatsoever is not of faith is sin. We need to be willing to live in faith and trust the Lord for everything. And this is where she was. She gave in faith. She had to say, not only is God worth my hurt, but she now has to say that God must take care of me. But also when we give all that we have, we not only give sacrificially and faithfully, but we give lovingly. Who is more important to her, herself or God? It's obvious. What impresses Jesus is the ranking that she gave to the Lord. She recognized that she's down here, but God himself is way up here. God is on the top of her ladder. God's far more important, and that impressed Jesus. Let me give you a couple of verses really quickly, and that's the point. But what impresses the Lord Jesus Christ? When whether it's money or a life or a time or whatever, when we say, God, my life is not about me. I don't care. Testimony matters, but it's not about me impressing people. My life is not about recognition. My life is not about my career. My life is not about my paycheck. My life is not about my titles or my education. But God wants us to come to the point where we say, my life is not about me and what everyone says about me. The American dream, in a lot of ways, is anti-biblical, at least the way that people interpret it. That may seem completely crazy to you. But when we live our life to elevate self, that's a problem. There's nothing wrong with working hard and taking care of yourself. That's the good part of it. But when we live our life to exalt self, we're doing something wrong. We should be dependent upon the Lord. But God is not impressed when we elevate self, but God is impressed when we devalue self and say, God, I'm elevating you. When we say, God, life is about you. I'm going to give you what I have. It doesn't matter what it costs me because my life is for you. Let me give you a couple of verses to go along with this. Something to keep in mind with this. I want you to turn with me. Go to Luke 6, verse 38. This is a couple of side notes. Luke 6, verse 38. Again, this woman did not have a completed New Testament in her purse. But she did trust the Lord and how the Lord would take care of her. And there were Old Testament passages that deal with similar thoughts. But Luke 6:38, give and it shall be given unto you. Good measure and pressed down and shaken together and running over shall men give into your bosom. For the same measure that ye meet withal it shall be measured to you again. Is that verse true? I know people go too far with that statement, especially TV preachers, but there is a principle and there's a promise. If you give, God will give back to you. And not only that, but God will give more to you than you gave to Him. That's what He says. And it's not always about sending in your seed offering to some TV preacher and then God will make you rich. That's not in the Bible. But if you give to God, God will take care of you and God will bless you. Guaranteed. God said so. So again, she didn't have Luke 6:38 in her purse, but she did know the principles that God will take care of you. So yes, she gave all she had, but God did take care of her. It ain't in the Bible, but I know He did because God does. So God will take care of you. Go to 2 Corinthians 12. Actually, we'll go to that one next. Go to 1 Corinthians 1. 1 Corinthians 1 and verse 27. Again, this woman, she had nothing, but God has used her for thousands of years to teach us about how to love God and how to put Him first. It's amazing what God can use. 1 Corinthians 1:27. But God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, and God hath chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty. And base things of the world and things which are despised hath God chosen. Yea, and things which are not, to bring to naught things that are, that no flesh should glory in His presence. That woman was base. She was at the bottom of the ladder. Talked about the scribes, how they devoured widows' houses. She was hated of them. But God gets glory out of things that have nothing. Because when we have nothing, it makes us turn to God for something. Well, how can God get glory out of my life? Just whatever you have, give it to Him. You may have a lot. Give it to Him anyways. Let Him have it. Let Him have control of it. Let me show you one more thing. 2 Corinthians 12. So 2 Corinthians 12. And verse 10. 2 Corinthians 12:10 says, Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities. That's, by the way, that's sickness, that's disease. That's when your body's falling apart. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses for Christ's sake. Why? For when I am weak, then am I strong. Again, true strength, power, whatever comes by our dependence upon God. This woman was used of God because of her weakness. And she didn't know the ins and outs of this, but she had weakness and she gave it to God, and God has used it. So here we have two, and I'm done in just a second, we have two opposing lifestyles. We have the scribes who were of pride and falsehood and living to make self good, to make self look good, to make self more important in the eyes of others. It's a self life, it's a fake, false, unspiritual life where everyone looks at them on the top of the ladder, and that's all they've gotten. And when they died, everything they earned at the top of the ladder was gone. They may have had a cozy life for a little while, without God's blessing, by the way. But that's the end. The woman, however, at the bottom of the ladder, the widow woman, had a life of faith, love for the Lord, dependence upon the Lord. And while no one noticed her, just one person did. The Lord saw her. The Lord recognized her. The Lord saw her actions and her heart when no one else cared. And again, thousands of years later, thank God for this godly woman who demonstrated just one act of faith and dependence upon the Lord. I don't know what you have. I don't know what your life is made up of. Again, there's nothing wrong with education. There's nothing wrong with a good job and a good career. There's nothing wrong with having those things. But whatever you have, give it all to God. Don't live for the ladder. Live for the Lord. Because when you live for God and faith and love and dependence upon Him, that's what impresses you.